almost within a month or so, and realized the great damage that IMF especially was doing to the Asian economies. But Larry Summers never changed, and he is now back at helm, advising Obama about the US economy and about the world economy, and that should truly give us pause. Now, the logic of the current interventions we can describe very briefly. In broad terms, the government has the power to intervene on three fundamental fronts to improve the economic conditions. First, the Federal Reserve can deliberately induce price inflation to counter the deflationary forces and excite what Keynes called the animal spirits of business leaders. Rising prices will also automatically ease the debt burdens of borrowers by diluting money's real value. And that's why creditors, by the way, always oppose inflation and are worried about it to death, to the death of the rest, that is. One piece of economic news is that during the last year, we have seen a 0.4% decrease in consumer price index, one of the broad price indexes measuring inflation, at least for all of us. This hasn't happened before, but the creditors are already worried about inflation, and they don't want the government to go too far. The second aspect is that Congress and the White House can simultaneously launch a major stimulus program composed of public spending and quick-acting tax cuts. And this, of course, means running up a budget deficit much higher than before. The budget deficit right now is more than 13%. Initially, people like me, even I thought that maybe it shouldn't be so high. But I can see, given the danger, that it probably had to be this high. And the right-wing Republicans who are now criticizing Obama for being a spendthrift really do not have any understanding of how complex a capitalist economy like ours really is. And what Obama really is trying to do is to save the capitalists in this country from themselves. Thirdly, if the first two steps are insufficient, the government may have to intervene more directly and manage a substantial liquidation of debt burdens. Either arrange ways to write off failed loans, as it did in the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s, and to some extent more recently in the current crisis, or create more lenient terms for the indebted companies and households, much like a banker's workout for a financially troubled firm. This, to some extent, has happened, and unfortunately, what has happened is that it has gone mainly to help the banks, and like the Bush administration, a lot of the cronies are being helped and not being called to task or called to the carpet or called to account for what they did. I agree with Professor Paul Krugman, the recent Nobel Prize winning economist, who actually is calling for a clean accounting of what happened during the Bush administration and taking whatever legal actions are necessary and possible so that, in his words, America can really look into its soul and really have a soul once again. And it makes good sense also from the economic point of view. Now, what is really the good news is that the money spent on green development projects will create more jobs than other investments. I have done some calculations myself, and I found that more than 22 jobs will be created by spending an extra $1 million on green public investment projects. By contrast, even progressive non-military projects at best will create approximately 15 new jobs per $1 million expenditure. Of course, military industrial complex creates even fewer jobs, only about fewer than 10 actually for each $1 million spent. But more really needs to be done to help the ordinary people. Rescuing the big players while allowing others to drown has been the conventional approach in recent decades. And this is something which I think needs a great deal of agitation that I referred to before, and a new kind of politics. Because left to itself, I doubt that this political system will do very much or deliver very much to ordinary people in every area. So this really is the time to start investing in solutions to the problem the country has long neglected. And there are indeed many economic opportunities that I will be happy to go into later. One of them is education, by the way, and we are all in this field of education. So much can be done to overhaul the especially public education system at all levels, which will actually help the students and families who are basically working class families, solid working black, white, brown, and other color Americans. However, the people focused on maintaining vested interests and privileges are naturally resisting such shifts in purpose and deploy their political muscle to block any promising departures. But a fundamental restructuring at least would open the way to think of a new world. The old world is dying, and if we wait too long, we will die with it. And that may be the reference once again to April being the cruelest month. But in Wasteland, the poem from which Jim quoted that line, the very first line, it's a depressing poem, but also there are references to lilacs which bring life out of death. And I want to read you a poem which actually calls upon us to reflect more deeply on the way we relate to this world, including lilacs. I wrote it during the Gulf War, and it's called War Sonata, and like sonata, it has 3 parts. 1. An invitation to be a part of war. The face of the other, half hidden, half revealed, like the moon in the mist, only the dark side, forever invisible. The invocation at last of the beast within the womb. 2. The conjurers of war build monuments of burnt landscapes. Their war is death inscribed in finely embroidered phrases, scatters, skulls, skeletons, radiates macabre fantasies on a landscape lacerated. Death dance in euphoria masks the urgency of a transgression that reason cannot long contain, the dark abyss their eyes cannot see. There is no moon tonight, only unreal dreams, unreal nocturne. 3. A clutching at the roots outside, voices awakening, strip away the concealment of words and gestures of denial. War is the ultimate pornography of the body and the mind. So much must be laid bare, just so we can once again speak in our own tongues. Just so we can once again turn to the sun without violence. Just so one lone bird can sing once again on one snow-covered branch. Thank you.
Well, now we'll take questions. How do we reconcile the prices? Again, correct me, sort of the inflationary aspects, and wages and prices are decreasing. So I think, so we have this two, sort of a debt issue in large scale in terms of the public debt, the national debt of the United States, which could well be inflationary. How do we then manage that when we're in a deflationary cycle? Will we be coming into a deflationary, then pop back up to an inflationary moment, which has got everybody really worried? So.
Okay, the second question first then. There are 3 things we have to recognize about these outliers. They are outliers. One is that they actually prospered by defying the prescription of liberalization. Basically, they actually globalized very selectively. Secondly, their success really didn't work for everybody. Income inequality in China, wealth inequality in China increased tremendously. And the same is true in India, especially for the small farmers in India. Thirdly, they are also suffering from this global crisis, and I don't think there will be an easy way out. Certainly, China could not export its way out this time. China has undertaken even a more massive stimulus project, but it is very big, and given that so much disparity has developed between countryside and cities, and within cities between the fixed stable population and migrant population, between the coastal areas and the hinterlands, I just don't see how China is going to manage this. The first question, it's very technical. I think we have to realize that right now the main threat is depression. Prices are declining, and if we cannot reflate the economy, then we may end up with another 1930s. Globally, and that would have consequences that are really very hard to predict at this point. So people who are worried about inflation, I think they are just barking up the wrong tree at the moment.
Thank you. What we'll do now is we'll move to the next speaker, Professor Gilbert. By way of note, a pamphlet should be available at the front desk of Professor Khan's remarks, so please feel free to pick one up, and should be very informative for you.